For anyone that has watched any of my videos on this channel or has been on my channel a few times, or even if they know me, they know I'm a villain's girl. Because I feel like the villains have a lot more to them than the hero. They're a lot more multifaceted and they're not linear. They're not stuck on a trail that they have to stay on. But there are some villains that just grab me and just make me confused about how I feel about them. Or sometimes they make me hate them, but in a good way. I don't know how to explain that. But ever since I started watching the Daredevil series, the Netflix series that's now on Disney Plus with Irvin, I started to really love the Kingpin. He's probably one of my favorite villains that I have ever encountered since Thanos. Now I know they really did change Thanos around, because I know in the comics he wasn't that type of person. He wasn't really charismatic either, but he had a rhyme or a reason why he was doing it. He wasn't doing it for the sake of being evil. When I saw the Netflix series, not only did I see a really just beaten man, or not just beaten, but beaten as a kid, to where that he had to do what he had to do to get to where he had to be. And he felt like he had to be there because he was the only person to do it right. The one thing I love about Wilson Fisk in the Netflix series is the fact that he made you think, sometimes believe, that Matt Murdock is more of a villain than he is. He pretty much not only became the reflection in a very multifaceted mirror, he really made you question who the villain really is. And that is incredible. That's not only incredible writing, that's incredible acting by Vincent D'Onofrio. But there are other versions of the Kingpin that I actually did like, that going back and looking at the movie sometimes and thinking about it a little bit more, they were portrayed pretty much in the same way depending on their time and the era they came from. When it came to the Daredevil theatrical cut, and I know it's one of the most hated movies that a lot of people have watched. A lot of people do not like the Daredevil theatrical cut. But I loved the late great Michael Clarke Duncan's version of the Kingpin, because he kind of reminded me of the black version of Lex Luthor. And Lex Luthor was an incredible, charismatic guy. Yes, he was a megalomaniac, but he was drawn, like people were drawn to him. He actually had charisma to where he was powerful enough to actually become the president of Metropolis at one time. But it's not really about Lex. It's about Lex's character that's being portrayed in Michael Clarke Duncan. Michael Clarke Duncan seemed like that he was the type of guy that not only he can cover up what he has done, the bad things he has done, he draws people to him. He had like some kind of a, I don't want to say an aura, but he has something that just kind of drew you to him. Not just the fact that he's incredibly handsome, but then also that he had a very intimidating presence, but then also you just liked him as a person. And I guess with the party scene, that's just kind of what I got from that when I actually did see his introduction in the movie, that he just didn't seem like that type of guy. I mean, well, you knew he was that type of guy, but you were still very drawn to him. And Michael Clarke Duncan, even though, yes, it was a race swap, but around that time in the 90s, nobody really cared. As long as he was able to portray the character very well, or at least bring something new to the table to make the character interesting, nobody cared. And he did it well, in my opinion. That's a race swap I really wouldn't mind. Now, I can't really say how he's portrayed in the comics because, of course, I have not read a lot of the comics that he was in. But I do remember the Spiderman the Animated Series, when the Kingpin was in a few episodes. He came off as incredibly intimidating. And not only that, he was very intelligent. He always will find his way to get out of trouble. And even if he gets caught, he will always have a plan and be like one step ahead of Spider-Man. And yeah, his body size, good lord, was incredibly cartoony. He was as big as a giant, but he was incredibly smart too. He may not have had the physical prowess, but he definitely did have the mental. And like I said, he was a product of the times. He was definitely incredibly cartoony, but he still had an intimidating presence that made his type of character work. He didn't seem like a joke. You honestly took him seriously every single time you watched an episode. And the episodes were well written, in my opinion. And his character was done pretty well. But which character is better? Which character was portrayed better? In the Spider-Man animated series? In the Daredevil theatrical cut? Or in the Netflix Marvel series? In my opinion, each of them brought their own flavor. Yeah, you had the 90s version of the Kingpin, but he was incredibly smart as well as very ruthless, and he knew how to get out of trouble because he was always one step ahead of Spider-Man. And then you had the theatrical cut to where that Michael Clarke Duncan's character was incredibly physically intimidating, but he was a very charismatic type of guy that drew people to him. And not only that, probably wanted people to work with him. I'm making assumptions when it comes to that. But from what I got from it, he was a very charismatic man that reminded me of the black version of Lex Luthor. It worked. He can probably get himself anywhere with that type of personality. But the Netflix series, not only was it a lot darker and a little bit more tragic, it was a lot more realistic. You would think that somebody who has been in a very broken time in their life knew they had to do what they had to do to make things right. The sad thing is, he hated his father, but he ended up becoming his father after his father was murdered. Spoiler alert, if anybody hasn't seen that, but yeah. The fact is, he didn't start off being a villain. He ended up becoming one in the eyes of one person. But the one thing I loved about Vincent D'Onofrio's character is that he made you question who the villain really was. Was it him or was it Daredevil? That's something that villains don't usually do. But that also shows that that show was very well written as well as well acted. And I think that all three of them brought a decent flavor. None of them was really stale, more stale than the next, but I feel like that each of them kind of brought their own flavor over time, just kind of aged like a fine wine, if that makes any sense. But by far, as of right now, the Kingpin is pretty much one of my favorite villains in the Marvel Universe. But I am curious to hear what you guys think. Which version do you like the most? Do you like the Spider-Man, the animated series version? Do you like the theatrical cut of Daredevil? Or do you like the Daredevil Netflix series more? I'm curious to hear what you guys think about it. Leave in the comments below. Let me know how you feel, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace out.